Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. I'm your host, Kiana Canada, and I hope that you're having a good day. Before we get into today's topic, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Remember that your likes, your shares, and anybody that subscribes to this channel is greatly appreciated. What it does is it pushes videos like this up in the algorithm. It tells the algorithm that these videos are important. But we must be reminded that just because videos like this are not pushed up in the algorithm does not mean that videos like this are not important. Now that that has been said, I have an announcement and I will be expounding on the announcement because that's going to be the topic for today. Just a moment. So, the announcement that I normally give when I'm doing these videos is an announcement that is bringing awareness to transnational repression. So, transnational repression, it's where countries reach across their borders to silence the dissent of their citizens. Now, these countries can do it in a number of ways. One way in which they silence the dissent of their citizens is through diplomatic relations. So, for instance, you have a embassy that is within a foreign nation, and an embassy for citizens of that embassy is like a country or a government. In a sense, that's the way that you can look at it. So if a foreign national is in with, excuse me, if a citizen is within a foreign country and their embassy is located in that country, well, that embassy is considered the government of that citizen. And essentially, in many cases, this embassy can control the actions of its own citizens. Now, it's really not limited to diplomatic relations. Transnational repression can also encompass foreign states that are seeking to silence the dissent of foreign nationals, such as if you remember the case of Julian Assange, who spoke out very publicly, did an interview with Pace, and articulated that he was being put through transnational repression by the United States of America. And so it's important for us to understand the modalities of transnational repression because they are continuously evolving, and we need to pay attention to how they evolve and the people that are impacted by this evolution of transnational repression. Now that that's been said, lately, um, if you have been following the headlines, or just if you live in the United Kingdom, you understand and you might be aware that there have been protests against transnational repression. And when I seen a video, I think it was like a news video, someone was doing an interview. It was a lot of citizens out protesting against transnational repression. And this protest was against the usual suspects. And this is what is very concerning to me is that when we hear about transnational repression, we're often hearing about states that are often accused of participating or putting their own citizens through transnational repression. But we never ever hear about states in the global north that are putting their own citizens or individuals that are connected to the global north through transnational repression. And so it's important for you to understand this because it is a growing phenomenon and it is shifting every single day, and it makes it very difficult to detect. And so the reason why I am bringing this up is because it raises an important question about complicity in international law. So Miles Jackson wrote a book about complicity in international law. And in this video, we're going to be kind of going over some of those concepts that he uh, coined and came up with to help us understand complicity. But before we get into that, the reason why I bring up states in the global north is because what's different about states in the global south is that when states in the global north put their own citizens through transnational repression or put foreign nationals who are part of the global north through transnational repression, their modus operandi is actually to shift the burden onto the claimant or the dissident or the victim to prove that they are being put through this practice that is often clandestine, that governments are engaging in this illegal practice and using its intelligence apparatuses to put its citizens through this practice. So oftentimes, one, they will shift the burden of proof or shift uh, it's either an evidential burden or a legal burden to the claimant to prove that they are going through transnational repression and to prove that there is, or to identify a culprit that is putting them through transnational repression. Second, when states in the global north are putting its own citizens through transnational repression, and two states that are actively engaging in practices that are fit the definition of transnational repression are the Republic of Ireland and the United States of America. And so what I've learned being put through transnational repression myself is that what often happens is that these countries will develop a faux ideology or a faux phenomenon that is fictitious to explain uh, why they are putting this citizen through transnational repression. And oftentimes, this faux phenomenon is a phenomenon that is fabricated, that's entirely made up by these intelligence agencies in the state to shift the burden, not only to shift the burden off of them, but to shift the responsibility and liability off of them and onto the victim. So, for example, in some respects, if a victim complains about being debased or persecuted or cruel and unusual punishment or torture, oftentimes that those acts are that is an allegation against the state that they have done something wrong, and the state is subject to liability, subject to being held responsible for that, right? But if the state can create this faux phenomenon, this fictitious reason for the victim's allegations, then now the burden shifts back to the victim and it's no longer on the state, right? So the state is no longer seen as the victimizer. It is the victim that is often seen as a person who is unsure about what is happening to them, or they're putting forth a vexatious claim against the state, etc. And you kind of see how you have perhaps a victim that is powerless without really any power, without any support, going against a large state. And doing so, going against this large state and all of these people within a large state, it can be quite difficult for this victim to actually realize their rights. And there's a number of things that could happen, such as due process. Um, their due process rights can be violated. Not only that, but access to justice can be curtailed as well in many respects. So that's something to really be mindful of. And so I want to give you a case study. This is just something that I am making up off the top of my head, although it is based on true events. Okay, so you have Mary Lou, and she is attending King's University Comcast. And Mary Lou is being put through transnational repression by Island International State, or the Republic of I'll make it up, the Republic of Entry. Okay, so the Republic of Entry. So we have Mary Lou. She's a student at King's University Comcast, and the Republic of Entry is putting her through transnational repression. Now, she is very sure that she is going through transnational repression. She understands the typology, and she understands that the modalities are evolving and shifting, but she is 100% sure that what is going on is transnational repression. And so Mary Lou attempts to speak out at her university in a way that is respectful and peaceful. And how she does this is by engaging in critical debates about human rights and political repression. Secondly, she is having meetings with her university professors, and she is revealing to them that she is being put through transnational repression by her state. Now, Mary Lou can't be 100% sure. It's not definitive that it is 100% her state, but it makes sense. One can infer that it is her state, because why would another state put her through transnational repression? She hasn't been to another state for another state to hold this kind of grievance against her. And so she is holding discussions with very articulate and intellectual professors about transnational repression. But she is coming to understand that these professors are less engaging and reluctant and almost reticent to condemn the practice and really stand by her side. Now, she has articulated very strong case law in her discussions that supports her position that this practice is not only wrong and against established principles or human rights norms, but the law supports her that these institutions have a responsibility to protect her. And so Mary Lou is not getting the responses that she thought that she would receive from these human rights practitioners. And it's quite disappointing and disconcerting to her. And so she thinks for a moment, what can I do to bring awareness to such a troubling issue that is not only impacting herself, but could be impacting other activists or students or journalists that don't have a platform to speak out? Because here, Mary Lou does not have a platform herself. All she has is her voice. And so she thinks for a moment, and she decides to hold an information session about transnational repression. And at this information session, she intends to educate law students about the modalities of transnational repression, how they have evolved, how the global south, excuse me, the global north states are also participating in transnational repression, and the signs to look out for. So, what she wanted to do, Mary Lou, is when she decided to actually schedule this information session with the correct people, what Mary Lou sought to do was to actually educate people so that they could be active bystanders. So if they saw these specific signs in a person, they would know automatically that it is transnational repression. And so she schedules a meeting and confirms a date and time in a room in her school to hold this information session on transnational repression. And everything goes well. And then a few days later, her posters are taken off the wall. And she goes and she inquires about it. And she says, "Why were my posters taken off the wall?" And the response that she received was that the School of Law, or this school where she is attending, so the response that she received is that the universe that King's University Comcast, uh, so essentially King's University Comcast did not approve of her information session. And so she's like, "Well, I actually had a meeting with the correct people. I scheduled it. And why isn't this information session approved?" And she speaks to the manager, and then the manager says that, "Well, normally students that are studying in the university can't hold information sessions within the school." And so Mary Lou asked to see policy that states that. And so the manager tells her that there aren't any policy that states that. And so Mary Lou is like, "Well, so if there's not a policy that states that, why am I being prohibited from actually holding this information session?" Basically, this information session is going to protect people. It is, taking into consideration, uh, sensitive issues. It's not hate speech. It's not any speech that would be considered a threat to national security. It's an information session that is, uh, the aim is to uh, provide information. So it's not a scholarly session. It's not one that is looking to teach. It's one that is looking to inform. And irrespective of that explanation, Mary Lou is told, "No, no, you cannot hold an information session in this school." Ladies and gentlemen, my question is, would that be a violation of Mary Lou's Article 10 right to freedom of expression? So, just a moment. Would that be a violation of Mary Lou's right to freedom of expression? And so we are going to look at that, right? So let's look at that now. So, Article 10 of the Convention provides everyone has the right to freedom of expression. This right shall include freedom to hold opinions, to receive and impart information and ideas without interference from public authority and regardless of frontiers. This article shall not prevent states from requiring the licensing of broadcast television or cinema enterprises. The exercise of these freedoms, since it carries with its duties and responsibilities, may be subject to such formalities, conditions, restrictions, or penalties as are prescribed by law and are necessary in a democratic society in the interest of national security, territorial integrity, or public safety, for the prevention of disorder, of crime, for the protection of health and morals, for the protection of the reputation of rights of others, for preventing the disclosure of information received in confidence, or for maintaining the authority and impartiality of the judiciary. Now, I want to look, ladies and gentlemen, at this here. So, what we can do is we can rule out maintaining the authority and impartiality of the judiciary because, again, Mary Lou was seeking to hold an information session, and this has really nothing to do with the judiciary. Okay, so we can rule this out: national security, territorial integrity, and public safety for the prevention or disorder of crime, for the prevention of health and morals. So we can rule that out because Mary Lou has made clear that the speech that she tends to hold is not uh, contrary to national security, territorial integrity, or public safety. There's no public safety concerns. It's an information session. So, because people are going to be sitting down and listening to a discussion about transnational repression, there is not going to be disorder or crime, and there's not going to be any health issue or morality issue at play here because this is just an information session. And so, ladies and gentlemen, and so what is left? So, for the protection of the reputation or rights of others, let me go to this one. For preventing the disclosure of information received in confidence. So basically, this one doesn't not this it does not apply because Mary Lou hasn't received any information in confidence from the authority figures, and so it doesn't apply in this case. And even if she did receive information in confidence from someone, she has the responsibility to educate or inform the public about acts of transnational repression. It's her duty as a student, it's her duty as an activist, a human rights defender. And so, what Mary Lou thinks the only reason her information session could be canceled is this: for the protection of the reputation or rights of others. And so states who are engaged in transnational repression are trying to keep this practice secret. They're hiding it. They don't want anyone to know. And if the public found out that this was a normal practice by states who are thought to uphold human rights, then that would tarnish their reputation in some sense, right? So, for example, the Republic of Ireland is currently trying to spearhead human rights through the Palestinian movement. And so, if the international community discovered that the Republic of Ireland is engaged in transnational repression, then that would lower its standing in likely in the eyes of the international community, and perhaps maybe it wouldn't. Maybe some people already know. With that said, so what can Mary Lou do about it is the question, right? Is there anything that she can do? If the country that she's residing in is complicit in acts of transnational oppression, is there anything that she can do? Well, it's difficult to say, right? Because she's just this law student who is within a country without any power. And the power is there is a power differential. So she doesn't have the power, and the states that are actually engaging in transnational repression has all the power. But what does international law say about a circumstance like this? Well, according to Miles Jackson, a state commits an internationally wrongful act where conduct one is attributable to the state and two constitutes a breach of international obligations. So if Mary Lou is in the jurisdiction of, let's say, uh, the Republic of Entry, does the Republic of Entry have an obligation to protect Mary Lou if she is within the jurisdiction? Well, yes, because she is on the soil, and if she has filed, for example, an asylum claim, they would have a responsibility to protect her. But what if the Republic of Entry is complicit in acts of transnational repression? So what does Mary Lou do then? Well, Miles Jackson said, we're going to go further into like this that I found very interesting in an article that Miles Jackson wrote. And he says that the conduct in question is the sharing of intelligence that captures the dissident. So even when a state, the host country shares information with with the state agents or the agents of persecution, then that actually captures this foreign state and this complicity. So there's this preventative complicity rule, and so that information sharing becomes kind of like a net that captures the host country. Miles Jackson also read from one of the or I think cited one of the cases from the European Court of Human Rights, which stated that the acts complained of were carried out in the presence of the officials of the respondent state and within its jurisdiction. So here, ladies and gentlemen, to compare this with our case study, so one of a purpose or an intention of transnational repression is to actually censor any dissent. And when Mary Lou's university took her posters off the bulletin boards and told her that she could not hold her information session in the school where she is a student, that is complicity in a sense that it is curtailing her right to freedom of expression. And so the respondent state is responsible because Mary Lou is within the jurisdiction of this respondent state. So consequently, the respondent state must be regarded as responsible under the convention for acts performed by foreign officials on its territory with the acquiescence or connivance of its authorities. So, for example, ladies and gentlemen, Mary Lou wants to hold an information session, And she puts up posters on the bulletin boards and has set a date. And intelligence agencies working for the Republic of Entry and the United States of Cromonia decide that they want to silence Mary Lou's speech. And so, what they do, ladies and gentlemen, is they make a phone call to Mary Lou's University. They talked to Mary Lou's manager and said, take those posters off the wall. We want you to take those posters off the wall and tell her that she can't have an information session on this topic. Well, to reiterate, Miles Jackson specifically states that the respondent state must be regarded as responsible under the convention for acts performed by foreign officials on its territory within which these individuals either acquiesce or there's connivance involved of its authorities. And so, as I mentioned earlier, is that these intelligence agencies are normally connected to either an embassy or a consulate office. They're connected to some quasi state that is within this foreign country. And so that phone call is coming from an authority figure, the state that is on the territory, and they are making the decision to suppress Mary Lou's speech, and that makes the persons that are carrying out those directives complicit. To be sure, Article 1 of the European Court or the European Convention on Human Rights imposes an obligation on state parties to secure to everyone in their jurisdiction the right and freedom defined in the convention. So just because Mary Lou is a foreign national does not mean that she is not protected by Article 1. It says specifically to secure to everyone in their jurisdiction. To say that a potential claimant is not within the jurisdiction of the state is to say that the state owes no obligation to her. Without any such obligation, there can be no question of international responsibility. But ladies and gentlemen, to reiterate, when the state says that she is not within the jurisdiction, there needs to be firm evidence of that. So, for example, if the claimant has filed an international protection claim that is evidence that the claimant is within the jurisdiction of not the country of origin, but within the jurisdiction of the home country. If the claimant is within a, let's say, for instance, the claimant flees and goes to a consulate office, or they flee and they go to an embassy that is a foreign embassy or a foreign consulate office, then the claimant is within the jurisdiction of that embassy and within the jurisdiction of that consulate office, not within the jurisdiction of their home country. Because under international law, a consulate office and a diplomatic office is set, or an embassy or a consulate's office is said to have its own jurisdiction. Indeed, most diplomatic officials can claim immunity because they can argue that they're not within the jurisdiction of these foreign states. And so, to reiterate, a consulate office, a diplomatic mission, these two are considered like not within the jurisdiction of this foreign nation. And so, say for instance, Mary Lou is in a foreign country and she is being oppressed by the United States of Cromonia, and she decided to flee to Neverland, right? Let's say, for instance, she decides to flee there to this Neverland embassy that is within the Republic of Entry. Is she within the jurisdiction of Neverland? Well, yes, if she goes into that diplomatic mission or if she goes into the consulate office and asks for asylum, she is within the jurisdiction of that consulate office and within that diplomatic mission. Moving forward, so there was a court case that was here in, or that was decided by the European Court of Human Rights, and it's a landmark court case, and I believe it has to do with capital punishment. And it has to do with the capital punishment with a person who was. So it has to do with not only not only is it a capital punishment case, but it is also an extradition case. And so the court was trying to decide whether the applicant would suffer cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment and punishment if they were extradited to the United States and for a crime that they had allegedly committed and was subject to capital punishment. And so the court in Soering held that the convention's special character as a treaty aimed at the protection of individual rights demanded that it be interpreted and implied in such a way as to make the rights therein practical and effective. So, what that means, ladies and gentlemen, is that rights are supposed to be practical and effective, not theoretical and illusory. And so, when persons are suffering from human rights violations and they are going to duty bearers and they are citing convention grounds, those rights are supposed to be practical and effective, especially if they are enshrined in legislation or enshrined in a state's constitution. So a state can't have the European Convention of Human Rights enshrined in its constitution, and then an applicant or a victim suffer a human rights violation, and then the state is saying that the person can't, they're denying the person access to justice and saying that the person does not have a legitimate claim. All claims deserve to be tested, and in most cases, warrants review of an independent body or tribunal. Now, what happens when? So what? I think what's important to understand is there is. Let me share my screen. So there's the draft articles on responsibilities of states for internationally wrongful acts. And Article 16, aid or assistance in the commission of an internationally wrongful act. And we're going to be looking at that because this case study that I brought up is, I think, what it does is it incorporates Article 16 and Article 17. So Article 16, aid and assistance in the commission of an internationally wrongful act. A state which aids or assists another state in the commission of an internationally wrongful act by the latter is internationally responsible for doing so if the state does so with knowledge of the circumstances of an internationally wrongful act. The important word here, ladies and gentlemen, is knowledge. So when Mary Lou informed the state that she is in, especially if she filed an international protection claim, she informed the state that she is going through transnational repression. The respondent state has knowledge of the circumstances of the internationally wrongful act. And so that knowledge, the fact that Mary Lou has informed the state that that she believes she's being put through transnational repression, that actually brings this state within the margins, or excuse me, brings it within, I want to say, within the arms of Article 16. So essentially, the state is captured by Article 16 by virtue of the disclosure of that internationally wrongful act. A state which aids and assists another state in the commission of an internationally wrongful act by the latter is internationally responsible for doing so if the act would be internationally wrongful if committed by the state. Now, the transnational repression, this phenomenon is it not many people know about it. Many states know about it, of course, and states like the Republic of Ireland, the United States of America, United Kingdom, they know a lot about this because there are citizens that are going through it within their jurisdiction. But what's important, I think, about that is the European Court of Human Rights has touched upon political repression without actually stating that that repression is transnational repression. PACE has, I think, just a moment. Just a moment, ladies and gentlemen. There's something I mean, let's see. Okay, so here, I'll share this with you. Let's share this. Okay, so there is a new inquiry in the United Kingdom on transnational repression. And so we're going to read this. There's currently no single accepted definition of transnational repression in the United Kingdom. It is generally understood to include instances of intimidation, violence, and harassment by a state against people in another state. Human rights activists, journalists, and political opponents deemed to be a security threat could be at risk from foreign governments seeking to suppress dissent. And so basically, this is the argument that states normally give that the person is a national security threat. So, why this is so convincing to foreign states is one, foreign states are very cautious about foreign nationals in their country and don't want national security incidents to occur. They don't want to put their citizens at risk. Second is that the political speech of a foreign national, which is new in a foreign country, it can be quite new, right? And so the foreign country may not understand fully why that activist or that journalist is speaking out against specific issues, and the state who is seeking to repress or to silence, censor that speech can manipulate the foreign state into thinking that the ideology of this person or the grounds in which they speak out about is threatening to the larger community. And so, continuing with this Joint Committee on Human Rights, it says the committee's inquiry will look at how transnational repression affects human rights of people living in the UK. It will explore if enough support and protection is available to groups deemed at particular risk of harm. The inquiry will also examine the effectiveness of the government's response to transnational repression and the effectiveness of policies and frameworks intended to prevent it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there is a call for evidence. There's a call for definition and understanding of what transnational repression is. There is a call for a government's response, law enforcement to support the victim, and international cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, this inquiry makes me very uncomfortable, and I'm going to tell you why. Is because there are states in the global north that are putting citizens through transnational repression. So, what likely is going to happen is that the definition for transnational repression is going to be very restricted so that the hard tactics are only, this is what I think is going to happen. So, I'm making a prediction because what I would do is I would actually try and submit evidence about transnational repression, but I know that my evidence is going to be intercepted because the state is putting me through transnational repression. But at any rate, what I think the state is going to do, I'm making a prediction, is that they're going to narrow down the definition of what transnational repression is. And they want to narrow it down to the hard tactics. So the hard tactics such as unalivement, extraordinary renditions, incommunicado detention, enforced disappearances. They want to narrow it down to these hard tactics so that they can only say that, or excuse me, so they can argue that it is states in the global north that are only putting uh, citizens through this practice, and that states in the global north only engage in these acts. And so this makes me feel very uncomfortable about this new inquiry on transnational repression because I am sure that this was connected to the United States in some way. I'm sure the United States has something to do with this new inquiry. And so I'm a bit reluctant, or not reluctant, but I'm ambivalent to even submit anything. I don't think that I would even submit anything because one, it may be intercepted. But I'm deeply concerned that they would restrict or narrow down the definition to only include the hard tactics and not the soft tactics. And sometimes the soft tactics are important because these tactics are also dangerous as well. Let's see. Is there anything else? Oh, let's see. So I think that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I think that's it. Tell me what you think. Do you think that we should include states in the global north who are putting its citizens through transnational repression? Do you think that Freedom House, do you think that Amnesty International, do you think that these NGOs are doing enough to be transparent? Like, in your opinion, is it only states in the global south that are engaging in transnational repression, or do you think it's states in the global north as well? Do you think that there should be a call for more evidence? Do you think that states should really look at technology and the digital aspect of repression? So now there's a few questions that I raised that I want to go over with you that I was thinking, well, I didn't raise these questions, but I was thinking about them in my human rights theories class today, but I didn't raise the question because I didn't think that I was going to get a real answer. And so I didn't actually raise the question. But let's see. Yeah, so I had wrote down some things that were coming to me. But I wanted to ask the professor about this, but I said, well, Kiana, don't ask because you're not going to get a real answer. This professor is probably not going to engage and give you a real answer because your answer involves states that we're not normally talking about. And so this is what I wrote down. I said, we have come to see that the violators of human rights are often the entities tasked with enforcing human rights. This may result in a state shirking its responsibility to protect human rights. Do you think the advancement of technology will make it difficult to enforce human rights? So let's let's deal with that first section. We have come to see that the violators of human rights are often the entities tasked with enforcing human rights. So if a person is a victim, a citizen is being subject to oppression, and this oppression rises to the level of persecution, and that persecution rises to the level of a human rights violation, and that oppression, which is now a human rights violation, is being carried out by the state. How do they get redress if the entities tasked with enforcing human rights are the same entities that are putting them through this human rights violation? And so I said, well, this could result in the state shirking its responsibility to protect human rights because the state is not wanting to tell on itself and hold itself responsible, right? The state is seeking to absolve itself and to shirk responsibility. And we know that now that there is an advancement in technology, and so everything is digitalized, everything is moving online, and states, this is, I think, this is a playground for the state. I'll put it like that. This is where the state is strong because the state has these intelligence capacities. The state is able to intercept communications, is able, the state has the capacity to communicate with the victim, pretending as if they are another person. So, for example, if the victim is sending an email to a human rights organization, well, the state can intercept that email and then respond back to the victim, pretending that that email came from that human rights organization. And so, in many instances, it's very difficult for the victim to identify that this is not a legitimate communication. And so the question that I wanted to ask is, does moving everything online increase the risk that a human rights violation will occur? And that's what I'll leave you with. Does moving everything online, does this digitalization of every aspect of our life, does that put us more at risk? And does that make us more vulnerable to human rights violations, being that the state is in control of, or the state really has the capacity to surveil its citizens and has the capacity to monitor our communications and to respond to our communications pretending to be entities such as a human rights organization, but in essence is intercepting those communications. Does moving everything online increase that risk that a human rights violation will occur, is the question. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I am Kiana Canada. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. I will also link my Facebook account in the description of this video. My Facebook account is not showing up in the search results. It's a new Facebook account. There's not a lot that I think it's less than 8 months old, or even less than that. And so I am going to link that in the description of this video. And I hope that you follow me for more videos like this. Tell me what you're interested in. Hopefully, I can do a video on that. And before I end this video, I want to say that if you're a human rights defender or an activist out there and you're being put through transnational repression or you're being put through a form of persecution, stay in there, hang in there. Everything is going to be okay. This is a message to you not to give up. This is a message to you that you got this. You got this. And it's a message to you to continue to move forward because you have it within you. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you next time. Bye bye.